The battlefield had forgotten the names of the dead. Charred spires reached upward like broken fingers, the glass and metal ruins of an alien city frozen in the moment of collapse. Ash drifted sideways in the windless air, giving the sky a bleached, surreal pallor. Plasma fires flickered quietly in the distance, their blue tongues licking at the rubble like they mourned it. Amidst the silence, a single figure moved. The soldier's name was Race, though there was no one left alive to speak it. His boots crunched softly on the fractured remains of a courtyard that once belonged to the Alaran capital, back when it had shimmered with crystalline spires and neural gardens pulsing with bioluminescent color. Now, only ruin remained. Race moved like a ghost through it, his body tired but practiced instincts tuned by months of guerrilla warfare on alien soil. His visor pulsed with static radiation levels still climbed in intermittent bursts. Nothing out here was safe. Not the air, not the terrain, not even the quiet. Not. A shadow flickered across his HUD. Not movement, but sensation. Something that nudged the edge of awareness without sound or image. Not a sound, not a signal. A presence. Like a whisper behind his thoughts, bleeding through the cracks. Race paused, breath held. There, not a voice, but an impression. A tremor of pain shaped like a plea. His grip tightened on the rifle. The sensor grid was quiet, no heat, no motion, no biometric activity, yet the feeling persisted, like the moment before thunder when the air remembers how to vibrate. The corridor ahead was mostly collapsed. A fallen support beam pinned what was once a vaulted ceiling to the floor. Beneath it, shards of luminous glass and fragments of psionic conduits lay twisted and dark. Half hidden among them was a figure motionless collapsed in the wreckage. The body's armor was curved and segmented in a way distinctly Alaran, the plating etched with faint fractal patterns that still glimmered dimly with stored light. Race approached slowly. The form was feminine, tall, and unnaturally slender with long limbs folded in awkward pain. One leg was caught under a slab of debris. Her torso was twisted just enough to suggest she'd been trying to crawl free. Silvery blue blood had pooled beside her, thick and slowly clotting. Her face was turned away, but her head moved barely. A flicker, a breath, alive. He lowered his rifle slowly. Alaran telepaths weren't supposed to survive orbital barrages. If she was here injured and alone, it meant she'd been left behind or discarded. Her people had moved on. Or perhaps they thought her already dead. In that moment, she was less enemy and more wreckage. Still, something about the way her fingers twitched against the stone sent a flicker of unease through him. She wasn't dead, and she was reaching for something, not help, not a weapon. Just reaching. He moved in closer. Her eyes blinked open, luminous. They weren't human eyes. The pupils were too wide, too deep. The color was like molten crystal, shifting tones of silver and ultraviolet glowing faintly even in the ash-filled dark. She tried to move, but pain cracked through her frame, forcing stillness. The emotions rippled off her like heat confusion, fear, exhaustion, and buried beneath it a hollow kind of dignity. Not defiance. Something older. Resignation. Race stepped over the rubble and knelt beside her. Her breath was shallow. The fractures across her armor suggested multiple internal injuries, likely broken ribs, maybe a punctured lung. There was nothing she could do now. No threat she could offer. Only the fragility of breath. He studied her. The contour of her face was strange, too sharp at the cheekbones, too fluid in the lines of her jaw, but not unpleasant. Alien, yes, but shaped by the same evolutionary drive that carved beauty from function. The memory of a village, his village, flashed across his thoughts, burned by Alaran assault drones. The smell of scorched earth, the hollow echo of his sister's name when no one answered. He had every reason to leave this creature to die. And yet, the connection pulsed again, so faint now it could have been imagination. But it wasn't. Her pain had bled into him. A raw whisper of despair, unguarded, unintentional. A final broadcast to no one. She hadn't meant to reach him. She simply had no one else. Race dropped the rifle and slid his arms beneath her. Her body was strangely light, less mass than expected, bones laced with biocomposite fibers rather than calcium. Her skin, where it met his gloves, was cold as wet glass. He lifted her slowly, careful not to jar the broken leg. Her head lolled against his shoulder. The motion stirred something in her, something like surprise. Not at the act, but the warmth. The presence of arms, of heartbeat, of something human and solid. She did not protest. Could not. He wrapped her in the heat foil from his pack, pressing it gently around her shoulders. Her breathing hitched, then deepened. Somewhere above them, a section of broken wall groaned and collapsed, sending a wash of dust through the air. Race turned from it, shielding the body in his arms, and began walking through the rubble-strewn corridor. The way forward was uncertain. There were no med-evac shuttles coming, no orders to follow, just a dying soldier and the enemy she now cradled like a fallen comrade. Beneath her skin, faint bioluminescent lines pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. Not synced, not yet, but close. The war was not over, but in that moment something else began. The path out of the ruins twisted between jagged remnants of architecture and shattered memory. Once, this place had been a cathedral of psionic resonance designed to amplify the mental frequencies of Ilaran telepaths across planetary distances. Now only its bones remained walls gutted by orbital firelight conduits, dimmed to a ghostly glow. Its sacred silence broken only by the scrape of boots and the soft rustle of cloth. Race moved with caution, not just for the sake of ambushes, though they were still possible, but for her. The alien woman in his arms no longer shivered. That worried him more than the tremors had. She had lost too much fluid. Her breath came shallow, regulated only by what remained of her neural discipline. He could feel it against his chest, each exhale fluttering like the wings of a dying moth. They passed beneath the shattered mouth of a stone arch. Vines fed by the nutrient-rich remains of biowalls had begun reclaiming the structure. Race paused in the shadowed alcove, lowering her carefully to rest against the wall's base. He reached into his field kit and pulled out the rations he'd salvaged, a synth protein bar, barely edible by human standards. He hesitated, then opened it and broke off a piece, lifting it to her lips. She didn't move, but her throat pulsed faintly then again. After a pause, her lips parted just enough to accept the offering. There was no way of knowing if her species could metabolize human food safely. But this wasn't about nutrition. It was about survival, if only by symbolism. She swallowed once. Her skin, faintly luminous where it met her collar, flickered like distant lightning behind storm clouds. Ray sat down beside her, drawing the heat foil closer around her shoulders. He didn't look at her directly, just rested his arms over his knees, eyes fixed on the broken skyline above. No sounds but the wind and distant metal groaning as gravity shifted the bones of the city. She stirred, not movement, something deeper. There was no voice, but an emotion shaped into clarity brushed his mind again. Curiosity. Not probing, not invasive, just present, watching him. Race didn't return the feeling, but he didn't shield himself from it either. Time passed in a haze of dust and drifting light. When he finally moved to lift her again, she didn't resist. Her arms remained folded across her body, breath light, but rhythmic. He walked through the ruins carrying her as twilight slipped down the spine of the broken towers. It was dusk when he found shelter. A half-buried structure protruded from the base of a collapsed ridge, its doors sealed but not destroyed. He forced them open with a grunt of effort and carried her inside, stepping into a chamber that still thrummed faintly with latent energy. The structure wasn't military. It was something older, organic tech laced with half-dead fibers. Its walls curved and bone-white like the inside of a living shell. A preservation pod lay dormant in one corner, inactive. Consoles blinked sporadically with unreadable glyphs. He laid her on a raised platform beneath a halo of glowing threads. The room responded. Lights blinked on first, above, then beneath the floor, and finally around the pod. Air recirculated with a faint whisper of sterile wind. A low hum spread through the structure, and the glyphs reoriented into motion. Race stepped back, one hand on his sidearm. The chamber didn't attack, it observed. The platform beneath her shifted slightly, adjusting her angle. Tendrils emerged from the ceiling sensor appendages likely and hovered just above her form scanning. The lights around her flickered a warm amber. Stabilization. Race let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He removed his rifle and set it aside. In the stillness that followed, he watched her features soften. The ridges of pain eased from her brow. Her fingers relaxed. The light in her skin returned faint pulses of silvery blue radiating from her collarbones, her temples, her palms. Her body, once limp and cold, now settled into stillness with purpose. He sat beside the platform and rested his back against the wall. The fatigue crept up slowly. Hours of marching, no sleep, no direction. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by the ache in his shoulders, the sting of shrapnel in his leg, and the quiet dissonance in his thoughts. It was not supposed to be like this, but she hadn't been supposed to reach for him, and he hadn't been supposed to answer. Night came wrapped in the hum of alien technology, He drifted into sleep with her presence just a few feet away. Sometime in the black silence between hours, a warmth pressed faintly against his mind. Not pain, not words. Gratitude. Then just beneath it, softer, more fragile, a flicker of confusion. Why? He didn't answer. But in his dream, he saw a child reach out a hand across a battlefield. Not in fear, not in surrender. Just to know what it felt like to be held. The chamber stirred before the sun did. Faint pulses of light circled the platform, where she lay tracing the curves of her body with precision sensors. Race guessed reading neural activity, cellular repair, biochemical flow. He sat in the same place he had fallen asleep, back against the wall boots, still on rifle nearby. The room's low thrum had lulled him into rest more effective than he expected. He rubbed the heel of his hand against gritty eyes and stood. Her condition had changed. The light in her skin was brighter, more rhythmic, like a breath shared between nerve endings and memory. Her body no longer trembled. The fractures in her armor had softened at the edges, knitted together by slow-growing organic seals. Her hair floated gently as if buoyed by static charge or unseen fluid. She remained still but aware. He could feel it just barely. A presence brushing his thoughts again. Less chaotic now. Focused, as if watching him from the inside. He moved toward the interface. Its glyphs rippled in layered patterns, unreadable but familiar in their logic. This was old Ellerin tech. Autonomous, adaptive, possibly self-aware. Race reached out and touched the edge of the console. It reacted instantly. A ring of light surrounded him. The air thickened. Threads unfurled from the ceiling, slow, elegant filaments of translucent neural fiber. They hovered, then descended. One brushed his temple. He staggered back. Too late. The connection snapped into place. There was no transition, no easing in. His mind was pulled forward like breath into vacuum. For a moment, he felt weightless, sightless, only awareness, drifting in a sea of overlapping voices and color. Then clarity. He wasn't inside her mind. Not fully. But something deeper had linked them. Her memory wasn't a stream, it was a storm. He caught fragments without meaning, starscapes spiraling over silver oceans. A cathedral of minds linked by threads of thought. The agony of disobedience. The silence after exile. There was no chronology, just emotion seared into experience. Then an image his face. She'd seen him, long before the crash. In data archives, in battle reports, in psionic profiles passed between Ilaran tacticians. Human soldier, prone to irrational behavior, emotionally unpredictable, biologically crude. And yet there it was. She had remembered his eyes before she remembered his name. The link snapped tighter. Race's breath caught. He dropped to one knee, palms on the floor, sweat blooming across his skin. The chamber around them responded. The healing platform pulsed. The glyphs shifted tone. New tendrils unfurled, two reaching toward her temples, two toward his. They hesitated for a second as if waiting for confirmation, then touched. The bond finalized. He didn't scream, but something in him did. A flood surged through the link neural to neural, memory to memory. It wasn't just thoughts. It was chemical signatures, hormonal bursts, the precise temperature of grief, his rage, her sorrow, his first broken rib, her first failed command, his sister's laughter, her mentor's voice, sight, sense, moments layered like sediment, crashing and colliding and melting. Then stabilization. The storm cleared. They weren't fused but tethered, a shared field. His breath slowed, so did hers. The tendrils retracted. They lay on opposite sides of the chamber now, he on the floor, half curled in instinctual defense. She on the platform, skin glowing with new equilibrium. But something between them had changed forever. He stood shakily. Her eyes opened. No surprise, no fear. Recognition. She knew his name. Not because it had been told, but because she had seen the way it echoed in his childhood. The way his mother had said it softly through tears. The way his captain had barked it during combat. The way he'd whispered it to himself while bleeding in a trench. And he knew hers. Not the rank, not the file, but the core. The part of her that had once believed obedience was everything. The part that had broken when she realized she could not watch another mind erased for asking questions. Lyseth. The chamber's walls dimmed slightly, as if exhausted from facilitating something sacred. They did not speak. There was no need. Instead, they watched each other, separated by mere feet, and a web of memory so intimately interwoven that words would only dilute it. Race retrieved his gear slowly. The pack, the rifle, the remaining rations. He checked the energy levels on his pistol. loaded a fresh cell. Liseth sat up with care. Her movements were smoother now, her injuries clearly mended by whatever cellular wizardry the chamber possessed. She stood after a moment, unsteady but self-possessed. Her armor responded, sealing fractures, forming a thin veil across the once bloody wound on her side. The room held its breath, then unspoken agreement. They would leave. Together, he offered her a water vial. She took it, not as an act of necessity, but of trust. The chamber doors opened as they approached. Light spilled in warm and amber. The sun had finally returned to the ruins, cutting shafts through the dust like heaven had cracked open. Race stepped out first. Liseth followed. Not a prisoner, not a rescuee. An equal. The ruins behind them hummed one last time and went still. But deep in their minds, something new remained woven through their neural tissue, humming faintly beneath the surface of every thought. A link. Permanent. Alive. The silence of the ruined city did not last. Sensors triggered. Race saw at first a soft pulse in the tactical band of his visor. Motion, south quadrant. 3 heat signatures moving with coordinated pacing. 2 more flanking wide precision deployment. Recon drones. Infantry class. Liseth didn't need the alert. She felt them. The ripple of pattern, the trained focus, the neural resonance of soldiers moving in practiced formation. They were hers or had been once. Elleren's special retrieval units, designed to extract compromised operatives, or terminate them. Her skin shimmered faintly. Race didn't hesitate. He slung his rifle across his back and pressed a small module against her upper spine, an adaptive camo patch synced to his field matrix. Her armor responded to the signal, rendering her outline almost invisible against the fractured light. Without a word, he tapped twice on her shoulder. Move. She understood the rhythm instantly. They ran. Not recklessly, strategically. Through alleys where shadow twisted between collapsed memory cores, through tunnels formed by buildings gutted of function and repurposed by time. He moved like a predator. She moved like a specter. And the whole time, the link between them pulsed. Not thought, not speech. Awareness. He felt her step before she took it. She anticipated his shifts before he made them. When he raised his rifle to fire, she ducked before the beam had even lanced through the sky. When she slid under debris, he was already there, hand extended, lifting her up again. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They had become something else. Race took position at the edge of a destroyed dome, a once holy site now turned hollow. Through the crack in its ceiling, sky burned with cloud fire from an upper atmosphere skirmish. The first unit closed in. He fired a single shot, pulse-charged ion disrupted. The drone shattered midair, its core exploding in a silent bloom of orange. A second drone came in low. Before he could target it, Liseth raised her hand and a wave of compressed pressure burst from her palm. Psionic energy igniting the air. The drone slammed into a pillar and disintegrated. He stared. She didn't look back, but he felt it, the flicker of amusement in her mind, the slight shimmer of satisfaction. He smirked. More units emerged. 5. Alaran soldiers swept the plaza, their movements perfect in formation. Armor glinting with mirrored plates, their weapons synced to central combat AI. Each footfall calculated, each attack synchronized. Too precise, too predictable. Race activated his repeater rifle and dropped low. Liseth surged left. She didn't leap. She glided, propelled by a mixture of telekinetic modulation and body weight control. The link between them surged again. Race didn't just track her movements, he felt her angles, her momentum. She blinded the right flank with a flash pulse. Race took down the center with a triple tap burst. When the lead soldier turned to flank him, Liseth was already behind him, disabling his exo joints with a localized gravity fold. It wasn't just synergy, it was co-authored choreography, a dance written in real time in the space between synapses and breath. Race dove beneath a collapsing beam and slid across broken tile. He tossed a cluster pulse without looking. Liseth caught it midair and redirected its detonation, sending a shockwave through the last 2 soldiers that launched them into a shattered wall. All motion ceased. The plaza fell silent again. Race stood in the middle, panting. Liseth joined him, hair shimmering with the faint light of kinetic discharge. They looked at one another, both breathing hard. Her arm bled from a shallow cut. His knuckles were bruised, but neither looked away. The link still thrummed. He could feel the shape of her fatigue. She could feel the weight of his worry. But neither of them said it. Not yet. Instead, she stepped toward him. One hand rose. It didn't touch his face, but hovered centimeters away. His breath hitched. The sensation that followed wasn't telepathy, it was something deeper. Resonance. He saw himself through her perception, reckless, violent, coarse, and yet shining with something irrationally precious. Empathy. The thing her people had tried for generations to engineer, but had only ever observed from a distance. Now it lived inside her. Because of him, a flicker of sensation traveled from her chest to his, a pulse not carried by blood or nerves, but through the bond. Biological and emotional. Then something shifted. Her hand dropped to her abdomen, slowly, uncertainly. Race frowned. He stepped closer. Her skin glowed faintly beneath her armor warm. A rhythm within a rhythm. Not just hers. Another, alive. He felt the breath leave his body. She didn't look up, but her thoughts did. They reached for him, not as data, but as awe. As fear. As something sacred and terrifying. Their minds aligned not in panic, but in stillness. She wasn't supposed to be fertile outside her kind. He wasn't supposed to be genetically compatible with anything Alaran. Yet beneath her hand, life pulsed weak but undeniable. Not conceived in design, but born of unguarded connection. Race stepped forward until they stood toe to toe. The war had forged him into a weapon, but in that moment all he could do was lay his hand gently over hers. No words, just the sound of breath and the impossible heartbeat beneath it. The ancient systems beneath the city stirred. They were never meant to awaken again. Subterranean vaults built long before the war, repositories of knowledge, technology, and things best left forgotten. But something in the bond between Race and Lysith had activated a signal low frequency encoded not in sound but in resonance. It had started when the hybrid pulse registered a bioelectric pattern unlike anything in either species. Sensors embedded in the ruins dormant for centuries suddenly responded. Their neural fields pulsed once in recognition. Then they opened. The pair had retreated into the shelter of a submerged monorail tunnel broken and choked with time. Lysith sat hunched beside a cracked power conduit, her skin glowing faintly with that now familiar dual rhythm, hers and something growing within. Race stood nearby, one eye on the darkness, one hand on the pulse scanner he'd salvaged from a fallen scout. It showed nothing recognizable, just one anomaly, the child. The signal it emitted wasn't just biological. It was structured, ordered in sequences like code, but alive. Not random, not background noise. It pulsed with meaning. Not now, not yet, but soon. Lysith leaned against the wall, a tremor running through her frame. Not from pain, but from the overwhelming tide of sensory input. Her body was adjusting faster than she understood. Already the neural bridge to the developing child had begun forming an Alaran phenomenon, meant to align mother and offspring from gestation. But now there were two minds in that tether, hers and Race's, and the child responded to both. Race approached. He didn't speak. They didn't speak much now. The bond had replaced language for most things. He could feel her strain the pressure in her temples, the ache blooming in her spine like heat lightning. He knelt and pressed the back of his hand to her cheek. Cool, but steadier than before. Her eyes opened slowly. There was something luminous in them, not light, something closer to awe. She had fought all her life to contain emotion. Now it flooded her in quiet, unbearable waves. In his mind, she sent a single impression. How? He didn't answer. He didn't know. The silence broke. Not with words, but with war. The vault door above them split open with the hiss of ancient hydraulics, revealing an interior chamber lit with geometric light. At the heart of the room, a console orb-like suspended midair, flickering with glyphs older than either of their species' recorded histories. Race stepped forward. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the room responded, not with weapons, with welcome. The console unfolded petal-like. Projections danced through the air, mathematical patterns, neural maps, language matrices. Some resembled Alaran technology. Others bore terrifying similarity to human neural interface schematics, despite predating human space travel by millennia. The system spoke in pulses, not words, but Race and Lysith understood. Biological bridge detected, hybrid key confirmed. The bond they shared wasn't just emotional. It was evolutionary, a permission. Race stepped closer. Glyphs rotated, scanning him. Then Lysith, then both together. The lights dimmed. The room pulsed once, then opened again. The vault's second chamber revealed itself. Not storage, not data. Weapons, but not any they recognized. Each construct shimmered in overlapping quantum states, neither Alaran nor human, but something that could only be wielded by the resonance of both. A twin-handled weapon drifted toward them, half-forged steel, half-woven light. Race touched it. It responded to his grip, forming a blade shaped by intent. Then Lyseth stepped closer, placing her palm against the hilt. The weapon pulsed and split. One part became his, the other became hers. When he turned to face her, he knew. The war was not over, but its shape had changed. Outside the retrieval, forces had grown. Human and Alaran both closing in from different vectors, neither aware of what they were about to encounter. The hybrid signature had drawn them both, but none of their scans predicted what they found. From the ruined subway tunnel emerged two figures, one clad in scavenged human armor, streaked with dirt and blood. The other armored in cracked psionic plating glowing from within with alien light. They moved as one. The first strike came from the sky, an Alaran seeker drone diving to disable. Race raised his half of the blade. The construct in his hand bloomed outward, dispersing the drone mid-air into harmless motes. Before the second squad could recalibrate, Lyseth launched forward, her palm flaring with inverted resonance. She struck the earth and the wave shattered enemy comms, scrambling their neural sync. They advanced not invulnerable but unstoppable in their rhythm. Human irregularity, Alaran precision. Two halves of a system never meant to coexist, now fused into something lethal and sublime. The battlefield became music. Race ducked beneath a barrage, rolling forward to sweep one soldier's legs before disarming him with a flick of his blade. Behind him, Lyseth danced through arcs of incoming fire, turning each shot into light that dispersed harmlessly across her kinetic shield. They never lost contact, not with each other, not with the heartbeat now growing stronger between them. At the center of the chaos, the vault behind them pulsed brighter. It was broadcasting now, not just passively responding. The hybrid resonance had awakened it. Its signal spread across the ruins like wildfire, interfering with every system tuned to a single species design. Ships fell out of sync, weapons misfired, command networks crashed. But Race and Lyseth moved like wind and fire. Together they turned the tide. Not with numbers, with union. And when the final wave of soldiers hesitated, human and Alaran alike neither dared fire. Because what stood before them was an enemy. It was the future. They didn't speak to the crowd. They didn't need to. Race stood beneath the fractured canopy of what had once been the Alaran Hall of Mind, a dome that had held a million thoughts in harmonic consensus. Now it stood in pieces, its broken roof casting lines of light across the ground like an ancient sundial, measuring the end of an era. Beside him, Lyseth stood tall, her armor dark with blood and light, her posture straight despite the fatigue. She held one hand protectively over her stomach, where the life inside her pulsed steadily. Not just viable, thriving. Around them, soldiers from both sides lowered their weapons. Some fell to their knees. Others simply stared, expressions caught somewhere between awe and disbelief. Commanders barked confused orders, but no one moved. Not even the drones circling overhead fired. Their targeting systems had begun to fail the moment the resonance field had activated, because the child's signal was spreading. The resonance wasn't local, it was systemic. Already the frequency had reached orbit, disabling communication satellites, unlocking vaults, long thought, sealed waking deep code from before the split of species and purpose. The pulse emanating from the hybrid child, unborn and silent, wasn't just biological. It was rewriting the framework of both civilizations. The vault had shown them the rest. The purpose of the weapon wasn't destruction. It was convergence. Long ago, the progenitor species, unknown, unspoken, had left traces behind, hidden, across dozens of worlds. Genetic keys scattered through potential bloodlines, waiting to be reassembled. Not by dominance, not by conquest, but by accident, by connection, by empathy. They were that accident. They were that key. Lyseth turned slowly, eyes scanning the faces of her former comrades. She recognized many of them. Some had served under her command. Others had stood on the other side of battlefield lines. One director, Niall, had sentenced her to exile when she questioned the old ways. He stepped forward now, slow and cautious. His face was unreadable. His psionic halo flickered with dissonance, overwhelmed by the field surrounding her. He said nothing at first, but his eyes dropped to her stomach, and then to Race, and finally to the resonance weapon they now shared. There was no argument to make, no denial left, because the data didn't lie, not to the Alaran. And the presence in the air wasn't just a signal, it was undeniable proof. Change had come not by decree, but by breath and blood and bond. Race watched as the lines of authority unraveled. Not through rebellion, but recognition. Old protocols designed to prevent contamination, crossbreeding, emotional degradation, had been undone not by sabotage, but by a single human choice. To care. He looked down at Lyseth. Her face was still alien, but every expression now resonated like a mirror held to something essential. Her skin pulsed with soft, light life, responding to life. He could feel the child in her as he could feel his own heartbeat, a separate rhythm, but one intimately woven to his. There were no words strong enough for it, only the fact of it. The soldiers slowly stepped back. The science counselors dropped their gaze. And from the far edges of the courtyard, civilians began to appear. Not many, a handful, hybrid support groups. Human Alaran civilians once hunted, now drawn by the signal, stepping out of the shadows into the strange sunlight of new history. Among them another child, half human, half Alaran, no longer a secret. The dam had broken. By nightfall, the first summit was announced. Unofficial, undocumented. A meeting not of politicians, but of caretakers and soldiers, midwives and engineers, builders and scientists. People. And at the heart of it, Race and Lisseth were not leaders. They were proof. Months passed. Then a year. In the reclaimed corridors of a converted Alaran cruiser now transformed into a neutral sanctuary station, a child was born. Her name was Erin. She entered the world not in silence or screaming, but in a radiant pulse of light that caused every device within the birthing chamber to reboot. Her first breath recalibrated gravity sensors. Her second synced every AI core on the ship to the same rhythm. She opened her eyes, one blue, one violet, and reached not for warmth, but thought. The medical team, all volunteers, Alaran and human, could do little but observe and record in wonder. She stabilized in seconds, required no incubator. Her vitals sang. She smiled at her father and made her mother cry. On the first anniversary of the ceasefire, a new monument stood on neutral ground. Not a statue, a tree. Genetically engineered by Lysith and Race themselves, a fusion of earth oak and Alaran singing wood. Its roots shimmered with bioluminescence. Its branches vibrated faintly with internal harmony. Around its base, families, some mixed, some still healing, but all present. No banners, no anthem, only laughter. And in the center, Erin played in the grass. Her skin shifted in patterns when she laughed. Her fingers glowed faintly when she touched another child. She could lift stones with her mind. She could read emotion without judgment. She spoke 3 languages by age 1. But more than anything, she listened, as if every heartbeat was a language she already understood. The world did not become perfect. There were still skirmishes, prejudices, arguments about protocol and purity, but they no longer controlled the shape of history. Something else did. A new kind of union. Not imposed, not designed, just chosen. 2 beings who should have never met, who touched, and in doing so changed everything.